Running ChatGPT costs OpenAI about $700,000 per day. Not per month, per day. That's roughly $21 million every month just to keep the servers on. And that number doesn't include training the model, it doesn't include salaries, infrastructure upgrades, or R&D. Just inference, just answering your questions. Most people assume AI is expensive. They don't realize it's expensive enough to bankrupt most companies that try to compete. The gap between what you pay as a user and what it actually costs to serve you is one of the most important unsolved problems in the AI industry right now. Here's the math that doesn't get talked about enough. When you send a message to ChatGPT, you're triggering a sequence of compute operations across thousands of GPU chips. Each token the model generates, every word it writes back to you, requires computational power. OpenAI charges API customers about 2 cents per 1,000 tokens for GPT-4. Sounds cheap, but that's the price they charge developers, not what it costs them to produce. Industry analysts estimate the actual compute cost is somewhere between 1 and 4 cents per 1,000 tokens, depending on server utilization and efficiency gains, which means OpenAI's margins on API calls are razor thin. And for the free tier users, every conversation loses money. The only reason it works at all is scale, and the bet that paid subscribers will eventually cover the losses. Let's separate what's actually expensive here. There are two completely different cost categories in AI: training and inference. Training is the upfront cost, building the model. GPT-4 reportedly cost over $100 million to train. That's a one-time expense, although models get retrained and updated regularly. The number includes compute time on tens of thousands of specialized chips running for months, the electricity to power them, and the engineering talent to manage the process. But inference is the ongoing cost, the cost to actually run the model after it's trained. And this is where the economics get uncomfortable. Every query costs money. Every user costs money. ChatGPT has over 200 million weekly active users now. Let's assume each user sends 10 messages per week. That's 2 billion messages. At an estimated cost of half a cent per conversation, you're looking at $10 million per week just in compute, $40 million per month. The $700,000 per day figure tracks, and it doesn't scale down the way software normally does. Traditional SaaS companies see their marginal costs approach zero as they grow. Serving one more Notion user or one more Slack message costs almost nothing, but serving one more ChatGPT conversation costs the same as the first one. The unit economics don't improve with scale the way they do in normal software businesses. The core cost driver is the hardware itself. AI models run on GPUs, graphics processing units, originally designed for rendering video games and complex graphics. NVIDIA dominates this market. Their H100 chip, the current industry standard for AI inference, costs between $25,000 and $40,000 per unit, and you don't buy one, you buy thousands. OpenAI's infrastructure reportedly includes hundreds of thousands of GPUs. Even at bulk pricing, the capital expenditure is staggering. Meta spent $9 billion in AI infrastructure in 2024 alone. Google and Microsoft are spending similar amounts. These aren't operating expenses you can cut, they're the cost of entry. If you want to run a frontier AI model at scale, you need to spend billions on hardware before you serve a single user. And the hardware depreciates fast. A chip that's cutting edge today is outdated in 18 months. The upgrade cycle is relentless. NVIDIA's revenue has exploded because every AI company is locked into this cycle. They have to keep buying new chips to stay competitive, to improve efficiency, to reduce cost per token. But the total spend keeps going up, even as the cost per query goes down. Here's where it gets interesting. OpenAI announced in late 2024 that GPT-4 Turbo costs 90% less to run than the original GPT-4. Massive efficiency gains, better optimization, better chip utilization, smarter model architecture. Good news, right? Except their total infrastructure spending tripled in the same period. How is that possible? Because demand grew faster than efficiency improved.
Every price cut brings more users. More users means more compute. More compute means more servers. The cost per token dropped, but the number of tokens generated exploded. It's the Jevons paradox applied to AI. Make something cheaper and people use more of it. Net result, higher total costs even as unit costs fell. And there's no easy way out of this loop. Raising prices kills growth. Keeping prices low kills margins. OpenAI is stuck in a position where they have to keep serving users at a loss while hoping future efficiency gains or new revenue streams eventually close the gap. Sam Altman has said publicly that OpenAI will need to raise more capital to continue scaling. The company burned through billions in 2024 despite record revenue growth. Revenue hit an estimated $3.4 billion. Operating losses were around $5 billion. You don't need an MBA to see the problem. This cost structure creates a natural oligopoly. Only companies with massive capital reserves or access to hyperscale cloud infrastructure can compete. OpenAI has Microsoft. Google has its own data centers. Anthropic raised $7.5 billion, largely from Amazon and Google. Meta is subsidizing AI development with advertising revenue from Facebook and Instagram. Startups trying to build competing models face an impossible equation. You need hundreds of millions just to train a model that might be competitive. Then you need ongoing infrastructure spending that scales with every user. And you're competing with companies that can afford to lose billions a year while they figure out monetization. The barriers to entry aren't just high, they're deliberately prohibitive. Even companies using existing models through APIs face challenging economics. If you're building an AI-powered product and your compute costs are 50% of revenue, you have a fundamentally different business than a SaaS company where infrastructure is 5% of revenue. Investors know this. It's why AI startup valuations have become more conservative even as AI hype has grown. The market is realizing that not every AI company has a path to profitability. So where does this go? The optimistic case is that efficiency gains eventually outpace demand growth. Models get smaller, faster, cheaper to run. Costs drop below revenue, margins turn positive, OpenAI becomes a sustainable business instead of a capital bonfire. The pessimistic case is that the current model is fundamentally uneconomical, that inference costs will always be too high relative to what users will pay, that the AI boom is built on unsustainable unit economics, and eventually the money runs out. Right now, we're in a strange equilibrium. AI companies are spending more than they make. Investors are funding the losses because they believe in future profitability or future strategic value. Users are getting access to powerful technology for free or cheap because companies are willing to subsidize it. But subsidies don't last forever. At some point, either the costs come down, the prices go up, or the model breaks. The $700,000 per day that OpenAI spends to run ChatGPT isn't just a fun fact, it's a signal, a warning that the economics of AI don't work the way the economics of previous technology waves worked. And no one, not even the people running these companies, knows yet whether that problem is solvable or if we're just early in a cycle that ends when the capital dries up.